Awesome. Just a reminder that this presentation will be recorded and it will be accessible to view on the Parent University website. Again, my name is Irving Peralta. It is a joy for us to come and to speak to you about Telpas, something that is important and personal to all of us. So we already introduced ourselves, but here is the team, and you can definitely use the chat to put in your question as we go through the presentation, and we will capture that question. We have some of our colleagues that are monitoring those questions. They can answer there, and also at the end of the presentation. We want to start off by starting from the beginning. How does Telpas play a role in your student's life? And so when you enrolled your child in a school in the state of Texas, there was a home language survey that indicated whether or not you spoke a language other than English at home, which it's a beautiful thing. We believe in being able to speak multiple languages. In my house, we speak Spanish and English, so it's a wonderful thing that our children come. And so when your student, when you fill in that home language survey and you do check that you speak a language other than English, then your student is given a language proficiency test. I myself worked the past couple of summers at the enrollment center over there by the Mambo High School, Easy Mason area. And there, if you remember, those of you who remember back in the days, I know a lot of your students probably are more like already in junior high and high school. But if you remember that time, that's when they took that proficiency test. If they came in at an early stage, a lot of the test was a one-on-one. Anyone second grade and up, they took that test online. Some students finished the test in one day. If you remember, those of you who came in at the junior high or high school level, your student came maybe for two sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, where the test simply looked into their four domains: speaking, reading, writing, and listening. And based on how they did on that test, that's when our department comes in to, of course, bring in that support as needed. Or if your student scored a fluent English speaker, then the support was not needed there. If you remember that we kind of presented a map of how the process works. So when you come in, here's kind of the layout. You take on that home language survey. There is that proficiency test. If they score a fluent English speaker, we call them a DNQ, or they don't qualify for our services. And so there's no need to take Telpas. But if they do score a limited or a non-English speaker, which we understand at whatever level the student comes in, then we recommend our two programs, which is a bilingual or a dual language, where the goal is for the students to be bilingual in their Spanish and their English, or an ESL, which is a recommendation for, of course, junior high and upper and high school as well. And they will take Telpas. And I also want to note that students whose parents decide that they will deny the services, though you are considered a parent denial, the student still takes the Telpas so that we can monitor their progress in their English as they acquire English each year. Now, our services and our program, we come to support. We come to make sure that their teachers are ESL certified. A lot of our job is to train your child's teacher in what we call the 7 steps, to make sure they're using the visuals, sentence stems, that they're practicing their speaking, their reading, their writing. And so we equip teachers to make sure that they provide the resources and, of course, the strategies so they can help students who are English learners. And so we make sure that we monitor that on our end. So we do come with the support so that every year the student is able to acquire their second language quickly, and of course they will become a fluent English speaker. And when you think about it, if I was to take my family into another country, let's say Germany, and if I enroll my students in a school knowing that my students do not speak any German, as a parent, would appreciate for the district to have services and, of course, to provide the support. And that's kind of what we are doing here. We want to provide that support to make sure the students are successful in acquiring their second language. We don't want them to forget their first language. That's a key. That's important. So you might have remember seeing this flyer if you happen to enroll your student in the past couple of summers. This is what we present the parents once we take that proficiency test. That after that test is completed, we'll give it to the campus. There is a meeting with what we call the Language Proficiency Assessment Committee, the LPAC, and then they are the ones who make the decision of where the students should be placed. The students are then monitor every year, or they take the Telpas every year to kind of see their growth, and we'll see what the Telpas looks like here in a second. And then they can come to a point where they reclassify, and one of my colleagues will explain what that looks like. And there's a big change this year to the reclassification criteria, so we're excited to see what that outcome will be this year. And so I'll hand it over to Ashley.
Good morning. Again, my name is Ashley Gomez, and I'm one of the 2 secondary specialists for Alvin ISD. And so what is the Telpas test? Telpas is an acronym that stands for Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. And the reason why it's called a system is because we are testing or assessing 4 domains of language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And it's done over a couple of days. So it's not a one-day sit and done test. It is something that can take a couple of days to do. So this is a test that's given to all students who are English learners or considered emergent bilingual in all public schools in the state of Texas. And it is used to determine if your ability to speak, listen, read, and write English has grown over the years. So this is an annual assessment we give our students to monitor their progress in their English proficiency. Now, every state in the United States has their own English proficiency test. So if you came to us from another state, there's a WIDA, there's Access. And so if you're familiar with those types of tests, this is the same thing. We are assessing the same thing that other states do. Every state is federally required to do an English proficiency test. And so this Telpas is just the one we use in Texas. And then on our next slide, we have 4 proficiency levels: beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. And so when the students take the test, they will get a score or a proficiency level for each domain. 1 for listening, 1 for speaking, 1 for reading, and 1 for writing. So that's what you see here in this bubble map, that each of those domains of language gets its own score. So while the test, we'll look at the layout of the test here in a minute, listening and speaking are on one test and reading and writing are another, each domain is assessed separately and will get its own score. Then when you look at your students' ratings, you have access to their score through the parent portal on Texas Assessment, the same website you go to look at your students' STAR scores. You'll see composite listed. And so what composite is, it is the average of these 4 scores. So it's an overall rating of where your child is in their English proficiency. So you see here, there's steps. We did this to show that the state of Texas expects students to move up at least 1 level each year. So if your student tested advanced last year in speaking, it is the expectation of the state of Texas that they would score advanced high this year. And so that's why we have it that way, that there is a responsibility on us as educators and that we are helping students make that progress in their English proficiency each year. And then the next slide explains our rating levels a little bit more in depth. So to give you an idea, beginner is little to no English ability. So these are our students who are typically new to the country. They have not learned English in the United States. And so that is what you typically see as a beginner. Intermediate is limited ability, simple language structures, very limited English, very high frequency and routine language. So repetitive language, something that you would see even in a native English speaker, a young child who is learning how to talk. Some of those 2-word, 3-word sentences as they're building up. Intermediate is still limited, but they have more comprehension than a beginner student. Advanced is grade appropriate. It's right at grade level, but they do still need language support. So they still need some scaffolds. They still need some teacher explanation, some one-on-one help, some small group instruction to help them access the grade level content. But overall, their comprehension is close to grade level. And then advanced Thai is at grade level. It is comparable to native English speakers level of proficiency. So typically what I tell people with an advanced Thai rating, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between a native English speaker and a student who is emergent bilingual and scores advanced Thai. A lot of times students at this level, teachers don't even realize a student is emergent bilingual until they look at their Telpas scores because their English proficiency is at a native level. And so the layout of the test, grades K through 1, they do a holistically rated assessment. So they are rated by their teachers using rubrics that we'll see here in a little bit. In grades 2 through 12, it's all done online. So in the past, the Telpas test was done at all grade levels holistically by teachers, but we have moved to online testing for 2nd through 12th grades, and but the holistic test still exists for grades K through 1 for age appropriate, grade appropriate level, right? I mean, the kids at K1 have a different expectation academically, and so that test is more reflective of where their abilities are at that age. And so again, in the holistic test, each rating, each domain is rated separately using a rubric like this, proficiency level descriptors. So the teachers will look at a rubric and it says at the very beginning EB students have little or no ability to speak English in academic and social settings. So there's an overall explanation of what students may be able to do linguistically at this level. And then there's bullets that help the teacher decipher where the student is in their language proficiency level. So this is an example of a speaking rubric, but the teachers have a rubric for each domain of language. So what you'll see is there is a progression. Beginning is little to no ability. Intermediate is limited, simple ability. Advanced is grade appropriate, but with need of academic support. And then advanced Thai is comparable to the native English speaker peers that they have in their classes. And then on our next slide, we have why is your student still taking Telpas? This is a question that we get often from parents. And so real quick, I was like, okay. So here is the one thing that we tell everybody: as long as your student is considered emergent bilingual, they will take this assessment. So you'll hear terms like reclassify or exit for students to leave the program. And so when we say reclassify, we mean to exit the ESL program. So for a student to reclassify and no longer take this Telpas assessment, they must achieve advanced Thai on the Telpas composite score. So that is a huge change from the past. This is new this school year. In the past, students had to get advanced Thai in all 4 domains of language: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And often we had students who got it in 3 domains and also passed their STAR reading assessment or their STAR EOC assessment, but they still did not reclassify or exit the program because they still had 1 domain that did not meet the advanced Thai rating. So the state has changed that and said if your student can get an advanced Thai average and also pass their ELA or their English language arts STAR assessment, then they're able to reclassify. So they do have to meet the criteria of passing this test, and passing is approaches. An approaches score is considered passing. And so they have to pass their reading test or their English EOC 1 or 2. And then they also have to get an advanced high average versus advanced high in every domain. So, what does that look like? Each domain is scored equally. Okay. So, 25% each. So, what that means is you cannot have anything below an advanced to get that advanced high average. So, you have students sometimes, there's students that I've talked to who have gotten advanced high in 3 domains, but the speaking domain they got intermediate because uh, they got nervous or they were really shy or something happened, and it gave them an advanced average because the intermediate dropped their average 1 domain. So our goal is when we're conferencing with students, which we do, we meet with our students, we show them their scores from the previous year, and we talk to them about what they need to do to get that average. And so, with that being said, your students should have an awareness of their scores. If they do not, you have access on the portal, parent portal. But if that is something that you would like to see yourself and you're not quite sure how to access that, please reach out to your campus or your child's teacher, and they should be able to direct you and help you get that information. But this is a huge change. It is something that I know a lot of parents have asked about, and we are hopeful for those students who have mastered their star, have met all those requirements, that this will be the year that they're able to exit. I see that we have a hand raised. Do you mind typing your question in the chat for us right now? And we will come back to it here at the end. But we're near the end of our presentation, so don't worry. But please put it so we make sure that we're able to answer that question. But yes, please add your questions in the chat. We know this is big news. This is huge. This is something that we're really excited about, especially for our 6 through 12 students, or our secondary kids who've been taking Telpas for a long time. This big incentive is that once you reclassify, once you exit the program, you never take Telpas again. This test is only a test for current emergent bilingual students. And so what we've seen is that we do have a lot of students who kind of tired and really don't really do their best on the test because they don't know why they're taking it. But we've worked really hard in conferencing with students and giving them that information, that we are hopeful that students will take the time to do their best on this test, that they'll be able to meet that exit criteria now that the state has changed that criteria for them. Now, Lauren's going to share with us some examples of what the test looks like, and we will come back and answer those questions for you. But please add your questions in the chat.
Hi, my name is Lauren Skeen, and I am one of the secondary specialists for the district. And so I'm going to walk through a few examples of what the Telpas test looks like. I want you to keep in mind that depending on the grade level of your student, the questions may be more simplistic or more difficult. And these questions and like the passages and things that go with them are based upon their grade level. So the students take a test within a grade level cluster. So when you see some of the things that are going to be in the examples, you might notice like a biology question or a math question, because those would be things that a 9th grade student would see on the Telpas test. But if the student's in 3rd grade, they're going to see more simplistic things that would be an appropriate reading level for a 3rd grader, and could be appropriate science or math content for a 3rd grader. So you will see some content-based questions, and students are tested on their English ability using academic reading and other types of things like that. So this is one reading example. You'll notice with this test that the reading ones can be several paragraphs. Generally speaking, when they start the test, they're very simple and may only be one paragraph or a couple of sentences, and then they get more difficult as the student progresses through the test. So this is an example of a longer passage, and you'll notice that there is a scroll bar where the student would scroll down to view the rest of the passage. And so generally the student would read through and be able to answer the multiple choice questions. So you'll notice with the reading test that the student does not have the whole passage read, and that's why there's a speaker icon with the red no symbol across it, because the student cannot have the passage read On the reading portion, they are testing the ability of the student to read in English. And so they're wanting the student to read it themselves. You will see that there are answer choices there, and the student can read those answer choices. On the reading writing test, the part that they can listen to are the directions. Everything else, they're only able to read it for themselves on the reading and writing test. Now, on the writing test, you'll see at the top that there's a speaker icon that big yellow arrow points to. So that would only read the directions for that specific question. You'll see also the speaker icon with the red no sign over it, and that means it's not going to read the actual sentence that they have to fill in the blank. That part, the test is expecting them to read that sentence and decide which one of those four answer choices is appropriate to fill in that sentence. So that's one type of writing test question. Now, here's another type of writing test question. Again, they would be able to listen to the directions part, which is the part that's in bold, but they would not be able to listen to the actual writing question where they're having to correct something. So you'll see on that writing question that there are some things that are highlighted in yellow. And this is one of the question types that kind of tripped students up or was a little bit more difficult because the students have to do two things. First, they have to click on which one of the yellow words is incorrect or is the error. And so they choose which one is the error and they click on it. And then in the box, they have to type in the correct word that would fill in the blank or the correct word that would go in place of the error that they clicked on. So some things that students struggled with was some of them didn't click on the yellow word that was wrong, or other students, instead of typing in what would be the correct word, typed in just the word error, so that they were showing that the yellow word is an error instead of showing the yellow word is wrong and this is the word that I would use to replace it. So sometimes those types of things can trip students up. So when we have students practice, we do emphasize that so that they will hopefully not have that problem when they take the test this year. So let's look at the next one. The next one you'll see is a science related question. So again, there are going to be questions that are related to the content that's grade appropriate for them at their grade level. So this is an actual writing question where they have to type out a paragraph response or multiple paragraphs as a response. And so you'll see the writing prompt above the picture says, in science class, students are looking at elements present in normal dry air. And then there's 3 bullet points, and all 3 of those things are expected to be answered in their writing. Describe the graph. What can you learn from this graph? Then, based on the graph, what can you conclude about the composition of air? And then explain why the information in this graph is important to know. So each of those bullet points could be a separate paragraph. So it would be a longer answer for this type of writing. So the students would click within that box and they would type their answer to all of those questions. And so when we are working with students, we make sure that they understand they need to answer all parts of the question, no matter how many bullet points are there. And we make sure that they know that they do have to type correctly. They have to capitalize the beginnings of sentences. They have to capitalize the first letter of a proper noun or a name or place, and that they need to put periods or question marks or whatever the appropriate ending would be for any type of sentence. So it's important that students understand that their grammar is expected to be pretty good when they're typing these answers. If they get a word wrong here or there or misspelled here or there, it's not going to count against them. But if they're not using any proper grammar, if a lot of words are misspelled, then those things start to decrease their score for that writing portion of the test.
And to any of our younger students whose parents might be here, when it starts in second grade and up, the content is going to be based on what they have already seen throughout the year. So this is, I believe, this is more of a sixth grade, seventh grade question, if I'm not mistaken. But for second grade, third grade, and up, they will see what they are normally learning already in their science in second grade, or in their math content class in fifth grade or fourth grade. So it's nothing new that they've never seen before. They're assessing their academic language. Can you produce that as you are describing? Which, again, as a department, we teach our teachers to make sure that they are describing, that they're concluding, that they're explaining, they're using sentences, so our students can practice how to do that in a class, together, in group, and individually, so they'll be prepared for this test.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I'm going to type an acronym in the chat box. When we are working with students at the secondary level, you can even ask your students if they're learning about the CER type of writing, which is claim, evidence, reasoning. And we use this with our secondary students, all secondary students, general education, ESL, special education, all secondary students are using this type of writing. And so we're encouraging our English learners to also use the same type of writing when they're doing the Telpas test. We want them to make those connections between Telpas and their daily classroom activities so that it's not something new, it's not something different than what they're doing in the actual classroom every day. So let's look at a listening type of question. So the listening test, again, will start very simplistically. When it first starts out, it's very simple things that might be a picture, and the question might say, and it would say verbally, so out loud, they would click on an icon and listen to the question. But it might just say something like, click on the basketball, and they would just click on the basketball. But then as they go through the test, it gets a little bit harder. They get to more extensive listening. So the longest pieces of listening that they have are 2.5 to 3 minutes long, and they are short stories that are played on a video, and that video has some pictures that go along with the story to help the students make connections to the story. And then they'll have 3 to 4 multiple choice questions based on the story that they listened to. They can go back to that story and listen to it as many times as they want to. Each multiple choice question that they have will have just the portion of the story that that answer is found in next to it. So looking at this one, there's a video clip there. It's a shorter portion of that little video that will just focus on that specific question so they can listen to it again, find the correct answer, and choose the correct answer from those multiple choices. So we encourage students to listen to it as many times as they need to. We encourage them to listen to the entire story all at once and then go back and listen to those little segments so that they can hear just the portion with the answer to that question. So they'll have 3 or 4 questions that are multiple choice like that. After they listen to the full story and answer the multiple choice questions, usually it's followed by a speaking question related to that story. So this is one of those speaking questions. You can see that they still put the video of that story right next to it. So if the student needs to, they can listen to it again. And then you can see the actual question next to it. And so the question here says, imagine that you are trying to set a new record for the world's largest pizza. Explain, and there's 3 different things to explain: how your pizza would be different from the pizzas described in the audio, what ingredients you would use, who would help you make the pizza. So we emphasize to the students, you must answer all parts of the question. So there's 3 parts to this one, and students need to explain each of those 3 parts. Now, if a student would like to hear that prompt, there's an icon right there below the question where the student can click on it and press play, and it will read the prompt to them, and it will read the bulleted uh, parts of the prompt to them. So that icon right below it that has the play button is the one where they'd be able to answer or listen to the actual writing prompt. Then underneath that is where the student will record their spoken answer. So what we do is we encourage students to either write out their answer Or within the test itself, there is a notepad where they can type their answer. So we encourage all students to either write or type their answer first. That way they can fully explain it, they can add details, they can add whatever they need to fully describe the entire writing prompt. And then we tell students that they are more successful when they read it directly off that notepad. Students tend to be very nervous if they try to just record without writing anything down and they're trying to just answer it off the top of their head. A lot of times you'll hear students who are saying, uh, and making sounds when they're trying to think in the moment. So instead, we encourage them write it down or type it in the notepad and then just read it directly off of what you've written. Students are more confident that way, and they tend to speak better and use better vocabulary when they've thought it out fully before trying to speak. So, when the student is ready, after they've written it out and they're ready to read it, they would click on that pink icon that has the microphone and they would read it into that microphone. After they've read it into the microphone, they can then click the green playback button and listen to themselves and make sure that it sounded good. If they decided that they don't like how that sounded, they have one more chance to then record. So there's two total chances. The student can record the first time, listen to themselves. If they don't like it, then they can click the record button again, play it back, and listen to themselves again. You'll notice that there's a timer there. This one is a 90-second timer. The students will have speaking questions that are like this that are either 45 seconds or 90 seconds. The timer is there, and when the students start to speak into the microphone, the timer will slowly decrease so they can see how much time is left. We really encourage students to use at least half of the time. So at least using halfway through that little marker there, and that helps students to visualize how long they've talked so that they can really explain things well and say enough English so that whoever is listening to it understands the student really does speak English well.
When we practice with elementary, kids are anyone. It's kind of shy. I mean, even us as adults, we don't like to hear our voice after we record it. So I'm kind of wondering how my voice is going to sound at this recording when I hear it back. So we all have that shyness and that we're very timid. So we do practice this. We do give students an opportunity. But what we've seen that helps the most is when they write out what they're going to say. When you just click on that microphone and hope that something comes out, it's difficult. And this is what keeps them away from that. From achieving that advanced high score in their speaking. This tends to be the lowest, at least for elementary. This tends to be the lowest domain across some campuses and some schools, just because of that fear that some students do have. There's other students, and we try to have space between the students so that they can just have their spot to record. But we do practice, and knowing that, and this year knowing, teaching them that they are not necessarily speaking into the computer, but they're recording, they're reading what they wrote, that we know it's going to be very helpful. Now, something that I often present to the kids is that boys and girls, you guys have the English to speak and to give us many details. Just pretend that you're putting on the headphones and you're about to go into your PlayStation, Xbox, virtual world. And boy, parents, don't they, don't they speak there for hours just talking to their community? So we know that they can do it. It's just a matter of them practicing and kind of taking that step out of being a little shy and recording their voice.
And I want to add, going back to those PLDs that we mentioned earlier, it's really there's a focus on academic language once you get to the advanced high rating. So it is so important when I'm tutoring students, I talk to them and I ask them, are there vocabulary words that you used in your biology class or in your chemistry class that would be appropriate to use here? Or are there adjectives or other words that you can replace some of these words with, or thinking about your sentence structure. Syntax is part of the advanced high score too. Are they able to use a variety of sentences? And so I tell them, use your transitions, first, then, next. All of that is super important. But one feedback we do get back from the kids is, yes, I feel more confident when I'm reading my answer versus talking off the cuff. It is difficult when you don't have a planned answer, because you may not be as intentional with academic language, or you may get flustered, or you may just kind of ramble and not really make a lot of sense. And so when students write their answers before they record, we're seeing much more success with that advanced high rating, because that advanced high is very focused on the academic language. And so it's so important that students are writing their answers before they record on the speaking portion of this test.
All right, so we did see that when you register that there were some people who were asking about ways that you can help your student at home. So we kind of gave you some examples of what some of the question types look like. So you can always use those types of examples to even have conversations with your kids and ask them about things that they're learning at school to get them to talk with their academic language. Another way that you can help students at home is there is an actual practice test and practice sets of questions. And so I am pasting this link into the chat. And when you log into this website, it looks like this. When you sign into it, you don't have to have a logon. You just simply click on the green sign in button. And when you do that, it will open up and you will be able to choose a grade level. So it's loading. So you can select a grade, choose any grade level that you want to. And then when you choose a grade level, and you scroll down, you'll see that there's STAR tests, practice sets, but below that are some Telpas release tests and practice sets. So in the last couple of weeks, we've been using practice sets, the reading and writing, where it says Start 2022. We've also been using the listening speaking practice set. You are welcome to have your students go through there. They will test microphones, they will test their headphones, and this shows you what they do on the day of the test and looks exactly like the test. And then when they get into the test, you can actually have your students practice some of these questions, and they can practice with the test format, because this is exactly what it looks like. They can practice with the notepad that's at the top. They can practice with the zooming in. So they can see all parts of the test and not be surprised by it. Your students are also given the opportunity to practice with this at school. Students are brought in smaller groups, and they have tutorial opportunities to be able to see what the test is like, to experience the notepad and those types of things, so that they're not completely surprised by it on test day. So if you would like to have ways to help your students at home, you are welcome to use that online portal. It's open to the public. So that link is there in the chat. Or if you want to do it later and you don't have the link directly open, you can always Google Telpas practice set, and it will take you to a website where you can get directly to this link. So either way, you will be able to have your students practice at home.
I also want to add that if you go to the released test option, Telpas release test, you'll actually see last year's Telpas test. So when you're looking at your students' scores, you can actually look at the test that they took last year and compare it to the scores that you're seeing on your parent portal or on your testing report. You can see what kind of questions they were asked. Now you're not going to get what they answered, or how they answered on the test, but you're going to see the exact questions they saw last year. Use last year's grade level, by the way, because it is by grade level cluster. But you have access to that. So they have the 2023 release tests online for you to look at. So I encourage you, if you're curious, or if you aren't quite sure why your student didn't do as well as you had expected them to do, or my student, I don't know why they got intermediate. I mean, they know English. You can go and you can look at the test and maybe see if it was a content issue. Maybe they didn't remember the content or they struggled with it, but more than likely, especially on the speaking test or the writing test, it was the usage of or the lack of usage of academic language. So please, we welcome you. Go to this website, look at the release test to see what your students saw last year.
Also, we notice in the elementary side that because it is a test, sometimes, in some cases, the you know the attitude of the student is, oh, they have to take another test, and so we try to encourage them to let them know that just to give their best every single time, so that they are able to start it in third grade, be able to reclassify, and no longer have to take this test. So we do see a little bit of that attitude, but once we give them some tips and some practices, they notice that, okay, yeah, I can do it. I can definitely show what I've known and what I've grown from the year before.
So these are some tips that we give all of our students. First of all, don't rush through the test. They have all day to take it if they need to. So we encourage them take their time, make sure that they read through everything carefully, that they respond to everything as extensively as they can. Then we encourage them to listen to the directions and questions and answer choices as many times as they need to. So on the reading test, they can't have the whole passage read, but they can still have the directions and the questions and answer choices read to them. So we encourage students to use that and listen to it and make sure that they fully understand the question. We also encourage that they, on the writing portion of it, that they write the answer like you would a paper for their English class or their reading writing class, and write as much detail as possible, and to go back and really read it and check for any mistakes before they move on to the next question. And then last, on the speaking portion, as we said earlier, we encourage all students to either type their answer or write their answer before they record and speak it directly into the computer. And students are able to read directly off their paper or directly off the notepad into the recording on the computer. And so we want all students to do that. We also encourage them, make sure that they are heard. So there's two chances to record. So we want them to record that first time and then go back and listen to it. And if they go back and listen and all they're hearing is whispering or they're not hearing themselves at all, then we want them to raise their hand, ask their teacher to help them, make sure that the microphone's working before they then record again. At the very beginning of the test, before they ever actually start it, there is a test for the sound system to make sure that they are able to hear themselves and to hear their microphone and their headphones before they even begin the test. And so we emphasize for them to listen to themselves at the very beginning of the test to ensure that everything's working correctly before they actually begin. All right, and the last thing that we're going to show you is that if you have other questions about the general program of English learners, emergent bilinguals in the state of Texas does have their own support website, and it's www.txel.org. And you'll be able to see more general information coming directly from the Texas Education Agency about the programs that are available in the state of Texas.